influencing popular culture, politics, and everything in between. The local station takes you ringside as we discuss the crazy world that is professional wrestling. This is Going Ringside with the local station.
Hello there, and thank you for joining us again for another episode of Going Ringside. I'm Scott Johnson. So glad you could be with us. Today, I'm very excited about our guest, and we're going to get to her in a bit. It is Victoria Crawford, who you knew better as Alicia Fox in WWE, friend of the show. We're going to talk a lot about her in just a bit, and she's going to join us here in a little bit. But before that, something happened regarding Going Ringside in the last week. I didn't quite see coming. I didn't really think it would grow to what it did, but I was shocked. And I want to talk to you about it. And it involves Kevin Nash, Big Sexy himself, one of the greatest of all time. So let me back up. If you've been watching our show the last 3 weeks, last week we had Glenn Jacobs, Kane, who's a politician now. We talked about the speakers at the Republican National Convention. The week before that, we're the only wrestling podcast, I think, ever to bring you an interview with Linda McMahon. Got all that because I was down covering the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. While I was there, I was covering it as a journalist and the host of Going Ringside, my two jobs. Hulk Hogan speaks. So Hogan's speech was kind of the biggest thing to come out of there, I guess probably second to Trump's speech, because everyone was excited to see the Hulkster. Wrestling fans were talking about it. Good or bad, it was just the talk of the country for a few days. A few days later, I notice Vice President Kamala Harris is announced as the Democratic Party running mate for president, right as President Biden withdraws from the race. Big, huge story. As this is going on, I'm kind of looking at social media, a lot of wrestling social media, and notice a post from Kevin Nash. The post from Nash was endorsing Vice President Harris, saying he supports her. Nash has been very supportive of the Democratic Party over the years on social media. This was no surprise. But I see this, you know, a couple days after the Hogan speech, and I started wondering, like, was this on purpose or not? I didn't know. So I put a video on social media kind of speculating, I'll let you watch in a second, regarding Nash. I just didn't think it'd go very far. I was wrong. So first, before we talk about the results of this video, I want to show it to you. Put it up. Hey, I'm Scott Johnson, host of the Going Ringside podcast. Is Kevin Nash auditioning for a speaking role at the DNC? So he just posted pretty much a praising Instagram post to Vice President Kamala Harris, saying that he's really excited to vote for her. Now, Nash has been a pretty outspoken Democrat on social media for a long time now. But after Hulk Hogan spoke last week at the RNC, people who run political campaigns notice this stuff. They notice the response to Hogan. Maybe he's making the calculation that the DNC wants another wrestler to speak at their convention. So he's getting very public on social media with his praise for Vice President Harris. So is it possible the political strategists on the Democratic side will notice Kevin Nash, a pretty high-profile wrestler who has feuded with Hulk Hogan, and bring him on board for a speaking role at the DNC? So I put this video out there where I put all my daily videos at the @GoingRingside TikTok and @GoingRingside Instagram channels. Well, I was kind of surprised when one of the commenters is Nash himself. So Nash gets in there, says Kevin Nash is a registered Democratic voter. Hulk is a wrestling character. Hulk isn't his legal name. Vice President Harris has my support. What he was getting at was Kevin Nash, the man, supports Harris. Hulk Hogan is a character. He was getting at Terry Bollea, would be the guy who, if he voted for Trump, would vote for Donald Trump, Hulk Hogan's real name. Anyway, so I see this, and I was like, oh, cool, Nash commented on my video. What I did not expect was a few days later, when I start getting all these comments on social media, are you the guy that Nash was talking about? And I was like caught off guard. I didn't know what they were talking about. So I was like, I wonder if they meant on Click This. So Click This is one of the biggest wrestling podcasts in the world. It's Kevin Nash's podcast that he hosts with his co-host. And I go and look, and I'm like, oh my God, they're talking about this video. I didn't quite see that coming. And Nash essentially went on to say, this is ridiculous. I have no interest in speaking at the Democratic National Convention and putting myself out there in front of the country like that. Hogan did. Nash didn't sound like he's interested. Here's a quick clip, a snippet of when they talk about it from a recent episode of the Click This podcast.
Talk about trying to make a story where there isn't one.
Wow, right?
Listen, Scott Johnson.
Listen, yeah. Let's name the times Kevin Nash tore his shirt. Oh, none. So
I have a feeling that the people that will be lined up to speak at the DNC, and I'm just spitballing here, are not going to include professional wrestlers.
So that was Nash and his host, Sean Oliver, discussing this. They talked about it for a while. You can go find the episode right now. It came out, I think, at the end of July. And they talked about this. My mind was blown. I was like, oh, I didn't realize this video would get that much play. And they discussed it for Nash to really say, look, I have no interest in doing this, despite what I had put out on social media. So he's essentially saying, I have no interest in speaking at the DNC, and as they said, they're probably not going to have wrestlers. So I will return. I'll be at the DNC as my other job as a journalist, and of course, the host of Going Ringside. I'm going to be there all week. Well, they don't think there will be any wrestlers speaking, which probably the case. Democratic Party typically, if they bring in celebrities, it's mostly A-list Hollywood or the music industry. But if we see anyone who could be, working on Going Ringside, I will try and get the interview and bring it to you in coming weeks. But Nash essentially responding, saying, I'm not going to be speaking at the DNC. That's not something he's interested in. So that all happened in the last week. I was kind of surprised that it got as much play as it did, but Nash not interested in speaking at the DNC, kind of like the opposite of the Hulkster, who did get a very high-profile speaking spot at the Republican National Convention last month. So that kind of came out of nowhere for me. I was kind of caught off guard when it happened, but and I will say this, if Nash hears this, I'd love to have you on the show anytime. We can talk politics, wrestling, whatever you like. That's an open invitation. But anyway, so that happened in the last week, and now I need to get back to the regularly scheduled programming on Going Ringside, the woman who we sat down with, and I think might be a regular recurring person here on Going Ringside, and that would be Victoria Crawford. You knew her better in WWE as Alicia Fox. So Crawford is from our area. I'm based in Jacksonville, home of AEW, as you know, and not far from WWE down in Orlando. And one of the people who grew up around here was Victoria Crawford, a.k.a. Alicia Fox. She went to Nice High School, kind of got into WWE alongside Kelly Kelly, and spent almost 20 years in WWE before retiring or stepping away about a year and a half or so ago. We had her on the show about a year ago. You can go watch it in the archives right now. And I remembered from the interview when she felt uncomfortable, she's like, I can't say much. She was in the process of just getting out of WWE. Her life was kind of in flux as she transitioned out of working for that company. And now, she told me, I can speak a lot more freely and talk about what's going on in her life. I'm planning on having her back on the show a lot in coming weeks. We want to pick her brain on things going on in the wrestling world. She's local, and we're hoping to have a pretty good partnership in the weeks going forward. But that's not about this. Today, I just want to talk about her life and what's going on with her, because she's got kind of a new business venture targeting people who are independent wrestlers on the indies and want to get to WWE or AEW, or if you're thinking about getting on the indies. So if you're listening to this, you're an independent wrestler, you're interested in independent wrestling, you know someone who might be interested in independent wrestling, and you want to learn how to get to the next level, well, Victoria Crawford is back on the indies now, or actually, this is her first time on the indies. She's never been on the indies before. She only was ever in WWE. Now she's in a whole new world and wants to bring her knowledge and experience to the wrestling community. And I just want to talk to her about that and everything else going on in her life as we develop a relationship and hopefully bring her back on the show a lot more in coming weeks. But for now, here is our interview with Victoria Crawford, formerly known as Alicia Fox. Well, we're joined by the lady herself right here, Victoria Crawford, who you probably know for many years as Alicia Fox, but now goes by her real name, Victoria Crawford. Victoria, thanks for joining us on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Scott.
So what are you up to now in life? Tell the viewers what's going on.
Okay, so what I've been up to is I've been taking independent bookings, but I've started a little passion project. It's Masters of the Ring Accelerator to help independent wrestlers find more economics in their bookings, their contract literacy, and to develop a community so they can feel supported.
I want to talk about that. I want to back up first because you're doing a lot of independent work.
Yes, sir.
So the first time we had you on, I want to say, like, you pretty much started WWE right out of high school, didn't you?
That's right here from Jacksonville.
So you never really knew any different.
No, I did not. I literally took the opportunity, obviously, and just really started my wrestling journey from there. But now being on the outside of a corporate body, it's really been a new experience doing it independently.
What's it like to do independent bookings? I mean, I've always wondered that versus WWE. You're very, they send you where to go and tell you what to say, and I'm sure,
Yeah, on one side, that's very like, structured, scripted, and you know that in the corporate. But on the independents, you have free range to be who you are, develop your character, kind of play around. More importantly, but you're your negotiator, you're your representative, and that can kind of get a little convoluted, especially if you're trying to be the performer. You know.
So is it harder? Is indie work harder than WWE work?
I'm having a great time with
You're enjoying it, really?
I am, because of the freedom aspect.
Well, that surprises
me,
because every time I hear it's the opposite way. Like, everyone goes to the indies, I want to get a WWE, but you say it's more free.
Correct. You know what? So for my experience from coming from the corporate body, I feel kind of like the traffic controller where I'm like, you know, I'll meet talent that wants to go to AEW, I'll meet talent that wants to go to WWE, and so I kind of feel like the traffic controller, because right now I think my position is kind of staying in the center and kind of, if I can have some good insight to share with some of the independent talent, share it. If I have a friend that's struggling at WWE or one of the corporate bodies, share a resource, you know, because I'm not anchored to anything. So this is the time to see what I'm made out of, so I don't know.
So tell me about your new idea, your new venture.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. So what it is a 2-day virtual event for free.
Okay.
At the end of the event, we're going to ask for applications. You know, if anybody's interested in staying with us, we've developed a 6-month program, almost, what is the word? Companionship program.
Okay.
It's, you know, but all in aims to build a community where they can have in-house resources, they can get bookings.
Talk to me what, that's hard, isn't it? Because I've never done it.
Yeah, exactly. So I had myself either, and I definitely needed to reach out for assistance, you know, someone that knows the independent market, because there's a lot of promoters all over the globe, and that's the best part, is wrestling is international, you know?
So I wondered, does indie bookings, if it goes well, I've heard it does, you can make money at it.
I believe so. I mean, you know, and that's kind of the part about knowing your worth, you know, Scott, like if you and I had a match, what you negotiate as your rate's different than what the promoter negotiates me with my rate. But, you know, there's a little bit of like in the veil conversation that people still don't really communicate that. So you could be working for $120 and I could be maybe $200 if that was, you know, regardless. In the independents, there's a lot of companies that are really trying to put a footprint out there, but it's expensive. It's a high risk, small reward maybe if it's a one-show payoff, right? But in a sense, when I'm on the independents, the independent talent know each other from other promoters and shows, so they have an ongoing culture, but it just seems that it's so it's just so all over. Nothing's really congruent in one concentrated space, hence like why it might be a better culture or a place for me to develop in wrestling if I were with a company, because it's like, okay, it's all in-house, it's protected, it's all your people in one place. But I don't know, I think it's fun to have flexibility in the wrestling sphere. I get to work with different promoters, I get to work with different talent, but then there is risk too, because then you go in not knowing their skill set, not knowing, there's another layer of things.
So what does it take to go, what do you see with the indie people you work with who are doing that 120 a night? Or maybe less.
Maybe less. Maybe less.
And to get to the next level, I mean, what do you see makes success?
You know, from my experience, one thing I see that makes success are the people. Like our fans, like once they have a bond with the talent, they seem to really be invested in their development. Not just the product they sell, not just their great matches, but the development and the story of them evolving in this business, you know, because for instance, you think of Ric Flair's longevity, right? Back in like all the earlier days, and now he's like in his later age. So fans have followed his journey, and I find that they have a real value to that. I think in the independents is really nice because a lot of them have fan bases that follow, and then when they go to a company, they come to like NXT to mainstream rosters. Like those talent have the woo already.
Is everyone on the indies, are they singularly focused on want to get to WWE, AEW, or is it not just like that?
Yeah, you know, it's only been about a year that I've been out there, but in picking some of their brains, they seem very focused to go either to WWE or AEW or wherever they're going to be able to support their life, you know, like who pays. And that's one thing in the virtual event we can really like sit down and talk. Some arrangements are different, you know, based on the company. Some people,
how people get in touch with the virtual thing? Has that been set up yet? Because we can put it out on the web when it does.
Thank you. Yes, we do have a website. It's mastersoftheringaccelerator.com.
And we're going to put it on our website when we get this article up.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. But, you know, it's such a passion project because, like, there's so many cliches. You know, wrestling is, you know, it's hard to make money in there. Women don't make money. They don't draw. You know, there's a lot of chatter, and it can kind of convolute your mission, you know, and it's difficult because, you know, a lot of these people on the independents still pay trainers to get the skill set in the first place, and so that is a deduction from your, then, you know, again, if you are in the corporate contract, for myself, I only have one experience, but I still were responsible to pay for my own gear, my own hair, my own everything, you know, my own development with no reimbursement, but that's part of the gig, right? So in a sense, you know, if money is the focus of some of these talent, like, it's difficult. It's like, you know, but a lot of them just really love the industry and they just really want to be a part of it. So, you know, when it comes to that love for the business, money kind of is the last thing on the list. Isn't that difficult to kind of comprehend?
Well, do you think the people with the love are the ones that make it? Because if you're just there for money,
you're kind of like going to be spinning your wheels. I'm just being honest, right? Because, you know, sometimes you'll make money, sometimes you'll lose money. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, how do I compare this to a relatable industry? I guess it's like flipping houses. Like you invest and then maybe you get
money the road.
I mean, but when it comes to wrestling, since it's something people can contribute for a long time, it almost gives me a little more insight on how to be patient with the business. You know, it helps me be more fluid and flexible with sometimes maybe I'll take a booking because I just really respect the promoter and the talent. You know, and maybe I'll get a back end selling autographs, you know. But again,
does the back end, like stuff like that work? Because I saw you at River City Wrestling Con. Do those things pay? Because I see a lot of talent.
Yeah, I guess they pay. I guess they pay, but you know, they're not consistent. So for me, I think when it comes to making money, there's making money, but I want to build wealth. So one thing when I think about building wealth, it's like the consistency of like revenue. And I think that's one thing in our virtual events we'll be able to really help them see that, you know, getting these bookings are great.
Did you say when they're starting?
Yes, August 9th and the 10th.
August 9th and 10th, so that's soon. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we'll get that out there.
Thank you.
So as far as I want to talk, because we got a lot of Jacksonville viewers here from Jacksonville. So what was it like growing up here in Northeast Florida and then all of a sudden you're just flying all over the world?
Oh my goodness. Well, it was definitely a new experience because I think I've always dreamt about going and seeing other parts of the world. I never in my life thought it was going to be through wrestling. You know, I graduated from Nice and then I was asked to take this opportunity and they wanted to teach girls, myself, Kelly and I, who not much experience.
Kelly also from Jacksonville. Our fans know Kelly, yeah.
You know, with no experience and see if they could teach us their thing, you know, WWE specifically, because it has a different style. You know, we're storytellers. We have promos. So there's a lot of intricate parts that go into developing that TV persona on that platform. But for instance, AEW, that talent can do all types of other appearances, so it's interesting, you know.
What's it been like for you to be in Jacksonville and have AEW start up here? Was that weird for you to have this start in your own city?
It actually gives me a lot of joy because I'm hoping that I could, you know, have a position to help them grow too, you know, especially being in Jacksonville. I'm more focused on contributing back to our city.
Are you ever in touch with AEW talent?
Yeah, here and there. I haven't had a match with any of them, but again, that's the best thing about wrestling is there's so many parts that you can take part of. You know, I feel as though my starting this virtual event with my girlfriend Bambi, my partner Bambi, you know, it helps me be in the industry without having to take a bump or get thrown around because, you know, my recovery, like in my body, you know, I don't want to like push myself to do these crazy events and matches and stuff when I physically don't know how, you know, 100%, or if I'm not, and you know, because training is a whole nother layer. You know, I love training at Hatchet, but you know Hatchet.
I know Hatchet. We profiled Hatchet Pro Wrestling.
Yeah.
Owned by a guy you may know as Dexter Loomis and WWE, Sam Shaw. So
yes,
yeah, that's a big, in our area, it's a big wrestling school.
Yeah, it's the only one.
Yeah.
It's the only one. And the other two trainers that are there are on independence. They haven't made it to the machine yet. So, you know, you have a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? You have just a lot of experience being like contributed, and I find it encouraging because then you can kind of have more information to kind of make your route. You know, without any information, it's kind of a very bleak, lonely road.
Yeah, I would imagine.
It's bleak, lonely road.
Do you miss WWE?
Some days, yeah. I miss WWE because of the people, the fan base there, because they're very interactive in that product. However, I was there long enough to kind of realize that one day I'm going to have to go on my own and see what I'm made out of.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a hard decision because you're doing one thing for yourself, you know. It's so my heart had to really come to terms with what are we doing here. You know, because on one hand, being from Jacksonville, there's a lot of places I could apply. Like, I used to work at Sierra Grill. I used to work at Beauty First. You know, going back to this domesticated life in Jacksonville, or how do I raise the city up, you know, didn't really look like it had to be wrestling involved. But there was something about wrestling and the evolution of wrestling that's still yet to come to fruition that I felt like I wanted to be a part of that. And probably more on an administration side than in the ring. So we'll see.
And before we go, how you doing? You've been doing this 20 years. How's the body holding up? I've wondered about that.
I'm doing well, thank you. I am kind of going through some post-recovery of like breaking my tailbone, but
oh my God.
You know, that's the one thing when you have the WWE schedule, we're on all the time. That certain parts of my life I forgot about, for instance, self-care, like going to the chiropractor, doing all this stuff, because I was so focused on being available for the next flight. Don't miss your flight, get that match, you know, pitch your storylines. And that was great, but now coming into a new time of my life, I'm like, wait a minute, how do you feed the cat again? How do you wash the dishes again?
Yeah.
Like the integration, but that's what I want to talk to, you know, some of the independent talent about, is that personal balance, you know, that those internal wins that are not televised, those internal champion things that are whole for you.
Sure.
And wrestling can be in there too, but sometimes this business can take us so far away from reality, you know, that we know too many of us brothers and sisters that fell a little more prey to the other side of things.
Yeah.
You know, because when you do get home, even if you are signed and making money, you know, there's a little bit of a dip of it being, for me, when I got home, I was like, man, my life is so bleak. You know, there's no lights.
You feel that way?
Well, I used to. When I only had 72 hours to turn over my luggage, like I had a lot of time of you know, being on airplanes, hotels, and things, that the performance chunk is a win, but it's very 7 minutes. It's very small.
It's the rest of the life that's hard.
It's the rest of the life that gets tricky, especially now with social media. You can instantly put your opinion and your feelings out like this. And so, you know, there's a lot of like mental health that needs to be discussed. Social health that needs to be discussed. Like, you don't, everyone's not your friend, you know, and not to be, you know, that's a very human statement.
It's life when you're out there publicly like you are.
You're so right. It's life. And, you know, for me, I'm not shy about talking about like my journey through recovery. You know, like in that time at WWE, I was going through a lot of this going on. And so finding recovery was probably what kept me interested in pushing forward.
Really?
You know? Yeah.
The recovery journey.
Yeah, the recovery journey of knowing how to cope.
Yeah.
That is, I think, a huge topic that all of us need safe places to discuss. Like, how are you coping with wrestling? You know, this very in-your-face, very live layer of yourself. But what if that self needs a hug or needs a little more nurturing? How do you cope with disappointment? How do you cope with pivoting so, like, company speed, corporate speed? You know, how do you cope? How do you develop a community culture of coping tools? And in my experience, I think because of that vulnerability, I wasn't really willing to share and find help. So I really kind of continued to kind of have to figure out my self-help, you know?
Yeah, well, it looks like it's
together.
going a lot better than maybe it was.
Yay,
Yeah,
yes, sir.
That's positive.
You know, but I love, I guess it's really a healing feeling for me to talk to you about that, because if I were still shy to share about the life you can lead in or out of wrestling with coping skills, with that, you know, that season of domesticating and reintegrating into your life, I would still probably assume that people only know me from my behavior on Total Divas or in my last matches, you know.
Is that what they think you are? They think you're the reality television star and that's what they know?
You know, this is what it's so interesting. Is like, based on my assumption, I would assume that that's it, right?
Yeah.
However, I learned that my assumption is my perspective, you know. I can use my words and like meet people where they're at. Some people have no clue what Total Divas is and this and this and this. So it is a great opportunity to bring a conversation to light. And yeah, and I do get a tickle about it, because I used to be just, I'll tell you, ashamed and shy about the opinions of the world, you know? And again, with some practice in the real world, I realized, oh, I just need more context out here. People are people doing their own thing. I'm not the focus of their attention. I entertain them, and that's great. But, you know, I can be honest and tell them, hey, man, they definitely saw me grow through a lot of things. Yeah.
Well, Victoria Crawford, a.k.a. Alicia Fox, thank you for joining us on the show today, and we look forward to having you back. A little tease of things to come.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you so much.
So I want to thank Victoria for coming on the show. So happy to sit down with her. And as I said, we were going to develop a relationship professionally to where she can come on the show a lot more, offer us insights on things that happen in the wrestling world, maybe some of the big interviews that we have in coming weeks. A lot going on here at the show. And I cannot emphasize enough, if you've made it this far in the show and haven't checked out some of the people we've had on this summer, I don't know if you've been paying attention. We've had Mick Foley, Linda McMahon, Kane, Eric Bischoff, Trish Stratus, and Lita together. Huge episodes in just this past summer. I'd go check out the archives right now. We had Booker T on, and we got just as big guests coming up in the coming weeks. So check out the archives, spread it to your friends, share it in social media groups. And one other thing, if Kevin Nash or Sean Oliver are listening still at this point, you're welcome on the show anytime. We'd love to have you, love to talk to you about wrestling, politics, whatever. Thanks for joining us today on Going Ringside. We'll definitely see you back here next time.
This has been Going Ringside with The Local Station, brought to you every Wednesday on your favorite podcast player, on News4 Jax Plus, as well as the News4 Jax YouTube channel.